Now, Overwatch seemingly is having a pretty rough time. While it is doing fairly well with the casual and new community, people are grabbing the game and playing it more now than they have in quite some time. For a lot of us that have been playing the game for a very long time, loyal fans of the game, we haven't been feeling the same spark anymore. At least I haven't been feeling that same spark to grind and enjoy the game like I once did. And I really do think that there's a couple of key reasons why Overwatch is in a pretty poor state from a veteran player's point of view. So let me actually break it all down, talk about what this means for the future of Overwatch and the future of this channel. But before we get into it, please subscribe if you enjoy the content. Only about 20% of you are subscribed, so do me a solid and press it right now, and let's get into it. Now, Overwatch has been out since 2016, and I'm one of the people that have been playing the game the entire time. I did start on console, and I played that for a couple of the early years of Overwatch, but then I swapped to PC, and I never really looked back, and then eventually coaching and content creation, and now we're here. And I can only speak to my own experiences on the matter, but for most of that time, I have been very addicted to Overwatch. I played it every day, I've loved it, I grinded it. I definitely took some breaks from the game. Notably, at the tail end of Overwatch 1, I took a rather large break, but other than that, and up until now, I haven't. I've been just playing the game and enjoying the game very consistently. But as of the recent seasons, I do think that things have been changing for Overwatch in a way that I'm not really enjoying to the level that I used to, and overall, I'm not enjoying Overwatch as much as I used to. Now, it could just be that I'm old, jaded, burnt out, but I think there's actually a deeper issue that's going on, and not a lot of people are discussing it. So the game has been balanced constantly throughout the course of its entire life cycle of Overwatch 1 and Overwatch 2, and there have been things that I would call minor changes, which are like character buffs, nerfs, damage changes, and just slight things on the smaller scale that affect the individual balance of characters within the sandbox of Overwatch. And then there are the bigger macro giant changes that affect the game and how it's played as a whole. So giant rules to the game. Things like role lock, things like 5v5 versus 6v6, or the addition of role passives and various things like that. These are changes that can fundamentally change how the game is played, felt, and just basically changing the core rules of the game. You're not changing the balance anymore, you're changing the rules. And I think this is really important because even when we hit some of the terrible quote-unquote metas that we had back in Overwatch 1, whether it was double shield or whether it was goats or whatever the case may be, these were still the same game. It was a balance problem. It was a balance issue that we ran into, right? The game still operated under the same set of rules, but there was new characters or characters were too strong that allowed something else to appear that maybe created a meta that was controversial or disliked by some. And often in response to those, we did see some changes to the rules of the game, right? We saw changes to role queue or the addition of. We saw changes going into Overwatch 2 of 6v6 to 5v5. And while I do think that rule changes are necessary at times to put the game on a better trajectory or fundamentally fix a problem in power level or design that was overseen or a flaw that wasn't revealed until certain characters got too powerful or whatever the case may be, I do think that changing specifically rules of a game or the fundamental big balance changes should happen as little as possible to a game. I think especially if you want a game to be taken competitively seriously and you want a game to feel good for people that leave and come back, and a game that can be kind of understood, especially a game as complex as Overwatch, over the long term, it can't change too dramatically from month to month or even year to year. But that's not what we're seeing with Overwatch, especially right now. We're seeing the game change dramatically what seems to be every single season. And to give you kind of an example, let's talk about the tank problem right now, which is obviously what Blizzard is trying to balance right now, and they're having a hard time doing it in the 5v5 environment. And I'm not saying it's not impossible, I'm saying that they are trying and it's difficult for them to do, so they're experimenting a lot. But from someone that is trying to play the game, 1 month they could play the game and it's like, hey, don't even shoot tanks, they are unkillable, don't touch them, there's no point. And then the next month they play the game and it's like, yeah, tanks are actually killable now, you could focus them down and you could kill them, which dramatically changes how the game is played. And then the next month again, now they're not killable again and you have to counter swap them or you're gonna lose. And this is just a small example of what the developers are doing right now, which is experimenting a lot, trying to find a solution, and they're using the player base to try try to figure out that solution. They come up with a creative solution to solve some of the problems that they have. They implement it, we try it, we hate it, we love it, whatever the case may be, and then they readjust and readjust and readjust. And I will say that this can be a great way to find the solution eventually, but in the time frame that they are trying to figure it out, it is not a very enjoyable experience for the player themselves. At the end of the day, it feels like we are guinea pigs. We are testers of what they want Overwatch to become. And we're not playing anything near what I would call a finished product, or a product that feels cohesive. It feels like every balance change, major balance change they implement, is going to get reeled back or changed just a couple months later. And I wouldn't be surprised if we're going to see that exact thing happen to the 10.5 changes and future changes as well. They try something dramatic, they reel it back or change it entirely. And once again, we're not talking about little tiny changes here. Changes in balance, changes in meta of characters. We're not talking about any of those things. We're talking about core changes to how the game is played. Core changes to what you do on a micro level, decision to decision in the game. What is objectively correct to do? What is the right way to play the game? And maybe I care more about these things as someone that does make educational content and content in general. I think that there needs to be a certain amount of consistency across the game's almost entire life cycle. And if you look closely at other games that are competitive or want to be esports titles, you see that. You see the core gameplay not change. Whether it's Rocket League, whether it's Counter-Strike, even Valorant for the most part has had few fundamental gameplay changes. This doesn't mean changes to abilities or characters or maps or things like that. It means the core gameplay itself is the same. The loop is the same, but that's not how it is for Overwatch. It's constantly freaking changing all the time, and once again, we are the experimental guinea pigs that are trying to figure out these things, or help Blizzard figure out what is the best future for Overwatch. And I can see the argument that if this will make the best game in the long term, right, the more research and data that they have, the more actual people they have that try these things, the faster they'll get to a solution, then it's good. It's for the best, right? But I also feel like I am sacrificing enjoyment and cohesion and consistency of Overwatch right now so that the future product maybe will be better. Maybe. And it doesn't really incentivize me to want to play the game or grind the game right now. Like, if the game was going to be different in like 4 or 5 months to the point where the fundamental decisions you're making across the roles are also different, then what's the point in grinding right now? Like, what's the point in going through the motions and playing? I mean, it legit feels like whiplash. Every time you drop the game for a little while, pick it back up, it's like a whole bunch of fundamental rules are different. And I'm not enjoying that aspect of Overwatch at all right now. Now, on the other hand, it is kind of ballsy, I would say, for lack of a better term, to do this, because I do think it sacrifices the gameplay experience right now and for the next like 2, 3, 4, 5 months, however long it takes for them to come up with real solutions to the counter swap meta and the tanking problem. You're almost sacrificing the enjoyment of those seasons for future seasons, right? And I do think that mainly the reason that Blizzard can just do this is there's no competition in the character ability shooter. I mean, I know that there's games like Marvel Rivals that are coming out, Dota's cooking on one, but I mean, it's so far beyond like the timeline of Overwatch, right? There could have been an ability shooter game that has come out anytime up until this point that was actually good with characters, that was actually a real competitor in the ability shooter genre. And I'm not talking about tac shooters like Valorant. I'm talking an arena mobility shooter, but there just really hasn't been. And it's allowed Blizzard this opportunity to not really care about making their product the best it could be today, because where are you going to go? Where are you going to go? I mean, that's how they probably are thinking, to be honest with you. But ultimately, the point of this video is to ask y'all the question: how do you feel about the constant changing state of the game? The core rules that are always changing around Overwatch, and how do you think that that affects Overwatch in the long term? Do you think it's good that they're trying to be very proactive to find a solution to some of these major problems, these major gameplay loop problems and balance problems? Or do you think that it's actually hurting and sacrificing the players of today, their enjoyment today, and creating frustration that Blizzard is only able to do because there isn't really a place for you to go outside of Overwatch to get any sort of similar experience. I'm really interested in your answer to this because I don't know if I just feel this way because I've been playing Overwatch for 7 years, grinding it constantly. I'm burnt out. I'm constantly thinking about Overwatch, and that's why I feel this way, or if there's a legitimate, real problem with the game that is kind of infesting and creating some of these feelings. I want to hear your opinion on it, so definitely I'm passing the question off to you. And if this video made you think at all, definitely smash that like, subscribe, and I will talk to you soon.